The House will come to order. Today, the pledge will be led by Tim Evans and Sebastian Iona from Resurrection Christian School, Loveland, Colorado, guests of Minority Leader Lynch.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Schiebel, please call the roll.
Representatives Amabile, Armagost, Bacon, Byrd is here, Bockenfeld, Basenecker, Bottoms, Bradfield, Bradley, Brown, Catlin, Doherty, DeGraff, Degree Kennedy, Dixon, Duran, English, Epps, Evans, Frizzell, Froelich, Garcia, Gonzalez Gutierrez, Hamrick, Hartsook, Herod, Representative Herod, Rep. Herod's excused, Holtorf, Judah, Joseph, Kip, Leader, Lindsay, Linstead, Luck, Lukens, Lynch, Mabry, Marshall, Martinez, Morrow, McCormick, McLaughlin, Michelson Janae, Ortiz,
Here.
Parenti, Puglisi, Ricks, Representative Ricks. Ricks is excused. Charbini, Sirota. Where did she go? Snyder, Soper, Rep. Soper, Story, Taggart, Titone, Valdez, Rep. Velasquez excused. Vigil, Representative Vigil, Weinberg, Weissman, Wilford, Wilson, Winter, Woodrow, Young, and Madam Speaker.
What's going on? 63 present. This is like an With this 63 present, 2 excused, we do have a quorum. Representative Frizzell,
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is an honor to serve with you.
and an honor to serve with you.
Fellow representatives, this is a very important week. This week, we are celebrating our beloved Girl Scouts. It's Girl Scout Week. Yay! You may or may not know that Juliette Lowe founded the first troop of Girl Scouts in Savannah, Georgia, back in 1912. That was before women had the right to vote. Only 5 years later, the first troop was organized in Colorado, down in Colorado Springs. From the beginning, Girl Scouts emphasized inclusiveness, the outdoors, self-reliance, and service. I myself was a Girl Scout and later a Girl Scout leader, which was truly a trip. I learned many, many life skills as a Girl Scout, like making a mat to sit on out of vinyl and newspaper and yarn. We call them sit-upons. I learned how to make bacon over a campfire in a brown paper bag. I learned that you could eat dandelion leaves. It's good times. So, Madam Speaker, I move that the Journal of Tuesday, March 14th, 2023 is approved as corrected by the Chief Clerk. And fellow representatives, for the Girl Scouts, for their cute little faces that you see when you go in and out of the grocery store as they're selling what? Girl Scout cookies. 4 Girl Scout cookies. Who doesn't love Girl Scout cookies? If you love Girl Scouts and Girl Scout cookies, please give me your loudest "I vote today."
Wow, that was a motion, Rep. Frizzell. And as a proud Girl Scout, I'll be voting aye. Members, you have heard the motion. The motion is to approve the journal as corrected by the Chief Clerk. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The Girl Scouts have it. The motion is adopted. Announcements and introductions. Rep. Froelich.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Transportation, Housing, and Local Government Committee will meet to hear one bill, 1232, in LSB-A at 1:30.
Thank you. Representative Weissman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is an announcement about the work of the House Judiciary Committee today at 1:30 in 112, which is our usual room downstairs. We are meeting to hear 3 measures: House Concurrent Resolution 1001, followed by House Bill 1019, followed by House Bill 1205. See you there.
Representative Kipp.
Energy Environment Committee members, you have the morning off. We have no committee today.
Representative Bradley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Don't be too sad. I've been given permission to be off Monday the 20th. I'm so sorry to leave you guys. Thank you.
So approved. Representative Tatone.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, 8 a.m. tomorrow is Joint Technology Day. We're going to be meeting with the Joint Budget Committee over in the Old State Library to talk about the capital prioritization process for IT projects. So be there at Old State Library, 8 o'clock in the morning.
Thank you. Representative Michelson-Janae.
Good morning, Madam Speaker, and good morning, members. Today, Public and Behavioral Health and Human Services will meet at 1:30 in room 107. We will be hearing House Bill 1232 for action only. See you there.
Representative Bachenfeld.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's an honor to serve with you.
And an honor to serve with you.
Madam Speaker, we have some of House District 56's finest here today. We have Elbert High School, the sophomore and the junior classes, and they're very interested in rural school funding and the BEST program. Please give them a hand.
Woohoo! Assistant Majority Leader Bacon.
Thank you, members. I just want to make an announcement that the ladies of the Epsilon Nu Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated will be in the building today. You can find us in salmon pink and green. So you will see members walking around in my wonderful sorority colors today. Just want to let you know we are the oldest African American female Greek letter organization, founded in January 15th, 1908. We have over 1,000 chapters nationwide with over 300,000 members. They are one of the largest policy movers on behalf of the Black community. And so if you see any of my wonderful sorority sisters, again in pink and green, please say hello and share what you're working on.
Representative Marshall.
Friends, Coloradans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I thought that would be appropriate. This is not a tribute to our beloved Caesar, but I have a collection of rare books with an interesting niche of women's suffrage, women's liberation, and I'm doing a lecture next Wednesday, the 22nd at 12 o'clock at SSB. I'd rather share these rather than keep them in my dark basement. So basically, it's going to be from Wollstonecraft to de Beauvoir, women's liberation, women's suffrage, with Wollstonecraft's original work. And if you come, you will be able to see the documentation of the most important moment in American women liberation and suffrage. And if you want to know what it is, you got to come here. And you may argue with me, but you will be wrong. So again, next Wednesday, the 22nd, 12 o'clock, SSB.
Representative McLaughlin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Education Committee, we have 3 bills up today. We're listening to Senate Bill 86, Senate Bill 96, and House Bill 1176. You might see something in common with all of those, the number 6. And then tomorrow, we are listening to 2 bills. We're listening to House Bill 1089 and House Bill 1231, and I can't wait to see you there. Thank you.
Representative Tatone.
Hello, I'm back again to introduce a group of individuals joining us today. This morning they are with the CAMES group, the Colorado Association of Medical Equipment Services. And CAMES is an organization of medical equipment companies, including oxygen delivery services, supplies, medical supplies, orthodontics, prosthetics, wheelchairs, hospital beds, rehabilitation equipment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They follow many issues that we do down here, but the following are really important to them, Medicaid reimbursement, all these different things. But what's really important is making sure that people do get their supplies. Supply chain issues have been difficult. They continue to take care of the patients in Colorado here. And repairing that equipment is really important as well. That's why we passed 2 bills last year on that. But please welcome them. We had a breakfast there this morning, and they're in the chamber somewhere. Where are you? Up there, they're up there. Welcome them today for being here and the work they do to help keep our constituents with the supplies they need.
Thank you, Rep. Tatone. Representative Bradfield and Representative Luck.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We too would like to recognize guests in the chamber. We would appreciate if the Sergeant Verhoff and his troops, which are with the 59th Quartermaster Company, 68th Division Sustainment Support Battalion, 4th Sustainment Brigade, 4th Infantry Division, right over here, if you would please stand.
Representative Luck.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We have with us today First Lieutenant Maher, Staff Sergeant Verhoff, Staff Sergeant Mosley, Sergeant Gonzalez, Sergeant Romero Lopez, Sergeant Obando, Sergeant Jaramillo, Corporal Weeks, Corporal Landevere, Specialist Williams, and Private First Class J. Thank you guys for coming today.
Representative Bradfield.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. These soldiers are from Fort Carson and are visiting the Capitol today to learn about state government. So I appreciate any help that you can give them. They are also guests of Senator Baisley. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Holtorf.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excuse me, Madam Speaker. I want to thank these fine men and women who support every functional activity in the United States Army. As a former 92 Alpha, multifunctional logistician, there we go. I understand as a former deputy commander of a support group, I understand your mission, and having served as the United States Army Reserve Facility Commander at Fort Carson, Colorado in a previous life, I am so glad you're up here learning about governance. Because when you raised your right hand to support the U.S. Constitution, part of that fabric is woven into what happens in every state chamber, in every state legislature, and in the U.S. Congress. So thank you for being the ones that raise your right hand, and thank you for supporting every military operation, because without you, nothing happens. Hua.
Thank you. Representative DeGraff.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just wanted to recognize our guests. I did some back a long time ago. I won't try to do the math, surprisingly. I did some infantry training out at Fort Carson, got to do some rappelling, and as a A-10 driver and an MQ-9 close air support instructor, I am happy to acknowledge that everything that we do, it is about boots on the ground. So I appreciate you, and I appreciate the mission that you do. Thank you.
Thank you. Minority Leader Lynch.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I guess this is a thing now, but I served in 4th ID. I was the Force Integration Staff Officer with the General Staff, and I want to thank you guys for all you do. Thank you for being here today. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Representative Story.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good morning, everyone. Just wanted to let you all know that the Capital Development Committee will be meeting tomorrow morning at 8:30 in Senate Committee Room 357. We'll see you there at 8:30.
Representative Amabile.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to say that business will be meeting today upon adjournment, and we are going to go right from adjourning to the committee. And we are going to hear one bill, House Bill 1181. Thanks.
Thank you. Representative Wilford.
Guess we're going to do this. It's fine. Good morning, everyone. I wanted to share that the Colorado Retail Council is hosting their annual legislative reception today from 5 to 7 p.m. at the Art Hotel on 12th and Broadway.
Thank you. Representative Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to announce that the Family Leadership Training Institute is here in the building today. This group particularly from Boulder County. So if you see them, please say hello, share a little bit about what you're doing. This group is a team of parents that have children between the ages of 0 through 18, and they learn skills to be able to advocate for their children. So make sure you welcome FLTI when you see them. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Martinez.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So I'm a former Marine, 0311 infantryman. You can't tell it by the hair, but it was there. So I just want to welcome you all to the chamber, but I will say that we do need a little more Marine Corps representation in the chamber moving forward. So thank you.
Thanks, Rep. Martinez. Speaker Pro Tem Degree Kennedy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, we have some county clerks with us today. There's actually a large gathering of them here who you'll see around the Capitol, but we have 5 of our county clerks in the House joining us today. If you'd please stand, we have the clerks from Park, Teller, Elbert, Rio Blanco, and Summit counties. So if you represent any of those counties or are nearby, I'm sure they'd love it if you come and say hi.
Hello, cousin. Minority Leader Lynch.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's an honor to serve with you.
And an honor to serve with you.
I also have some guests. So a couple of them gave us the pledge today, but there's an initiative from Northern Colorado, so multiple districts from up north are represented with the Larimer County GOP, and they came today to make sure that we're actually working and that their work to get us elected is put to good use. So if we could welcome my guests from the Larimer GOP. Thank you.
Representative Soper and Representative Taggart.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, today we have some special guests also in the House. I don't know if you felt the general IQ of the chamber raised by 1,000-fold, but yesterday the Grand Junction High School won their 20th Governor's Cup for Knowledge Bowl, which makes them the overall winningest Knowledge Bowl team in Colorado high school history. They've won 24 overall state championships, and they even came today with a little bit of bling, their Governor's Cup trophy and their other 4A trophy as well. So we'd like to welcome them.
Congratulations. Representative Taggart.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Not to put a dig on the Front Range, but from time to time, it's really nice that the Western Slope beats you guys. So welcome to Grand Junction. My wife is a Tiger, Grand Junction Tiger, along with 2 of our 4 kids. So thank you guys for coming and congratulations. Go Tigers.
Yeah.
Welcome. Representative Catlin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's an honor to serve with you.
And an honor to serve with you.
Thank you, ma'am. There's a guy in the building today that is absolutely shocked that I'm here. He's known me long enough to know most of my terrible secrets. So he came to the building today to see how it really looks, how it really feels. He's a good friend of mine, Stan Whiteford in the back. Say hello to him. Thank you.
I have an announcement. Representative Joseph will replace Representative Gonzalez Gutierrez on the Public and Behavioral Health and Human Services Committee for today only. Members, our next order of business is third reading of bills. Mr. Schiebel, please read the title of Senate Bill 78.
Senate Bill 78 by Senators Fields and Van Winkle, also Representatives Judah and Lynch, concerning warranty reimbursements made by a motor vehicle manufacturer to motor vehicle dealers.
Madam Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move Senate Bill 78 on third reading and final passage.
The motion before us is the passage of Senate Bill 78 on third reading, final passage. Mr. Schiebel, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Please close the machine. With 59 aye, 5 no, and 1 excused, Senate Bill 78 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Schiebel, please read the title of House Bill 1191.
House Bill 1191 by Representative English, also Senator Fields, concerning prohibiting corporal punishment of children in certain public settings.
Madam Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move House Bill 1191 on third reading and final passage.
The motion before us is the adoption of House Bill 1191 on third reading, final passage. Mr. Schiebel, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Please close the machine. With 48 ayes, 16 no, and 1 excused, House Bill 1191 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Schiebel, please read the title of Senate Bill 57.
Senate Bill 57 by Senator Rich, also Representative Taggart, concerning the removal of the duty of county treasurers to be ex officio district treasurers for special purpose districts providing drainage and irrigation services.
Madam Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move Senate Bill 57 on third reading and final passage.
The motion before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 57 on third reading, final passage. Mr. Schiebel, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Please close the machine. With 62 aye, 2 no, and 1 excused, Senate Bill 57 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Schiebel, please read the title of House Bill 1009.
House Bill 1009 by Representative Lindsay, also Senator Moreno, concerning measures to improve services for students who use substances and in connection therewith making an appropriation.
Madam Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move House Bill 1009 on third reading and final passage.
The motion before us is the adoption of House Bill 1009 on third reading, final passage. Mr. Schiebel, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Please close the machine. With 45 aye, 19 no, and 1 excused, House Bill 1009 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Schiebel, please read the title to House Bill 1024.
House Bill 1024 by Representative Gonzalez Gutierrez and Epps, also Senators Exum, concerning measures to increase family resiliency through providing greater support and protections for children placed with kin, including relatives, and in connection therewith making appropriation.
Madam Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move House Bill 1024 on third reading and final passage.
The motion before us is the adoption of House Bill 1024 on third reading, final passage. Mr. Schiebel, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Please close the machine. With 64 aye, 0 no, and 1 excused, House Bill 1024 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Representative Ortiz, co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Schiebel, please read the title to Senate Bill 37.
Senate Bill 37 by Senator Cutter, also Representatives Judah and Bradfield, concerning requirements for solicitations related to the Secretary of State.
Madam Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move Senate Bill 37 on third reading and final passage.
The motion before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 37 on third reading, final passage. Mr. Schiebel, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Please close the machine. With 64 ayes, 0 no, and 1 excused, Senate Bill 37 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Schiebel, please read the title to House Bill 1171.
House Bill 1171 by Representatives Mabry and Gonzalez Gutierrez, also Senator Gonzalez, concerning requiring just cause for the eviction of a tenant from a residential premises.
Madam Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move House Bill 1171 on third reading and final passage.
Okay, Representative Soper and Representative Vigil.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We'd like to ask permission to offer a third reading amendment.
Please proceed.
Since I haven't really done this at all this year, just a clarifying, do I go ahead and describe it, or?
This is just requesting permission to offer a third reading amendment.
So we have a technical amendment concerning language in the notice, and that's the reason why we'd like to offer this particular third reading amendment.
The motion before the body is the permission to run a third reading amendment. Mr. Schiebel, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, give them all to you. Cool. Sure.
Representatives Basenecker and Sirota. Please close the machine. With 63 aye, 1 no, and 1 excused, the motion to have a third reading amendment presented on House Bill 1171 is adopted. Representative Vigil.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move House Bill, Amendment 050 to House Bill 1171 on third reading and ask that it be displayed.
Amendment 50 is properly displayed. Representative Vigil, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So what had happened is when I was first looking, really reading the bill in depth, I felt like there was a bit of an issue with specifying 2 exact languages to ensure language justice for this issue over time, and suggested that we go with the 2 most common languages spoken in the census tract. And then also my good colleague here ran into a couple of issues with that himself, and we came together on those couple of technical corrections and came up with a joint amendment. If you'd like to explain your...
Representative Soper.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, so the reason why this is a technical amendment and why we're offering it and why this is part of a grand compromise here is it's really important that we get words right that we're putting in statute. And it's important that notice be given in English and in either the second most common language in the census tract or, which is the key word here, the language that the landlord knows that the tenant speaks as their primary language. And we're offering this as something to ensure that notice is understood by all, that we have a smooth process that takes place, and would ask for a yes vote.
Thank you. Representative Mabry.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is an honor to serve with you.
And an honor to serve with you.
Members, we work closely with Representatives Vigil and Soper on this amendment, and we urge everyone to vote yes.
Seeing no further discussion, the motion before us is the adoption of Amendment L050. Mr. Schiebel, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes.
Want to ask for a no?
But don't pass this. This is not, just if they keep it like this, it's gonna stay English. Fix that. I don't think that's a good idea. I think we killed the amendment.
The House will stand in a brief recess. The House will come back to order.
Because they have to vote. Holtorf and Windsor. We're still waiting.
Please close the machine. With 16 aye, 48 no, and 1 excused, the amendment is lost. Representative Winter.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to make a motion to revert this back to seconds. I mean, we're up here working on it in thirds, and I think we need to kick it back and do some work. Thank you.
Representative Bockenfeld.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to second that motion. This bill is clearly not ready for prime time. Let's get it back to seconds and let's get it right. I don't think it was right to start with, but we're going to keep working on it and maybe we can get it back to thirds.
Seeing no further discussion, Representative Gonzalez Gutierrez.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I'm going to ask for a no vote on that motion. We have done extensive work on this, and as you all know, in the legislative process, this is part of the process, is continuing that work, working with our colleagues, working with our stakeholders. And of course, this work will continue when it goes over to the Senate. This is part of the process, so I ask for a no vote on this.
Seeing no further discussion, the motion before us is to send House Bill 1171 back to second readings. Mr. Schiebel, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
No.
Representative Ortiz votes no. Please close the machine. With 19 aye, 45 no, and 1 excused, the motion is lost. Representative Soper.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
And Representative Vigil.
Madam Speaker, we would like to ask permission to offer a third reading amendment. I know this may sound like deja vu, but there was a technical problem with the last amendment that we've been able to correct and would like to offer the amendment that fixes that.
The question before us, Representative Herod.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thanks, members, for bearing with us. I just want to thank the sponsors of this amendment for making this quick change. It was a technical amendment here. I think the intent, just to state that for the record, is to ensure that there are two languages, English and then the most predominant language spoken in that area, to be presented to those tenants and to be presented on this bill. And so thank you all for making that change. I'm glad we caught it before we moved it on to the Senate chamber, and I asked for an aye vote.
The motion before us is the permission to offer a third reading amendment. Mr. Schiebel, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Please close the machine. With 52 aye, 12 no, and 1 excused, the motion is adopted. Representative Vigil.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move Amendment 51 to House Bill 1171 and ask that it be displayed.
One moment, please. The amendment is properly displayed. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and my apologies, members, for our error, and I thank my colleague for catching that. We had done a grammar check on this amendment before we printed it and introduced it this morning, and something additional was changed in it, and that was totally totally my mistake that I did not catch it before we moved the amendment. So I thank you for your patience and ask for a yes vote.
Representative Soper?
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to echo the same sentiments here. This was truly a compromise, one that we worked out to be able to have the two differences over language and to be able to say that it's for sure going to be in English and the second most language in the census tract, or any other language the landlord knows or has reason to know is the primary language of the tenant.
Representative Gonzalez Gutierrez.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I do want to thank Representative Herod for your assistance in this, and also, of course, Representative Vigil and Representative Soper for bringing also this language forward. I encourage a yes vote on this and appreciate the attention paid to it.
Seeing no further discussion, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment 051 to House Bill 1171. Mr. Schiebel, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Please close the machine. With 52 aye, 12 no, and 1 excused, Amendment L051 is adopted. The question before us, oh, did we not? Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move for the passage of House Bill 1171 as amended on third reading and final passage.
The motion, Representative Holtorf.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Esteemed colleagues, as people try to solve the problems of housing in Colorado and the lack of housing, and if you look outside, you can see the solution is actually coming. About 3 blocks over here, they're building another apartment complex. Not sure how many floors, but it's going to be more than 3 or 4. 2 or 3. Looks like it might be 4. There's another building over here that's coming up just a few blocks, about 8 blocks that way, might be 10, that's getting put up, that's providing for housing, trying to meet that need. It's slow, but that's because of rules and regulations, supply chain disruptions, inflation, and many other factors that have come to Colorado. But with this particular bill trying to allow tenants to stay in their apartments, even if they haven't paid their rent, I believe now for 3 months, 90 days was the compromise. And I don't know if they even pay their rent in those 3 months or if they just sit there and kind of loiter until they have to leave. There's some fundamental problems with this type of public policy. The first problem, it's a direct attack on private property rights. If the landlord owns the property, and that's small, medium, or large, and there's a contractual agreement between a tenant and a landlord to live on that property for exchange for a monetary transfer called rent on a monthly basis, that's the deal. Where I come from, deals are made on a handshake and a man's word. I've seen $500,000 deals. I've seen multi-million-dollar deals on a handshake and a man's word, or a woman's word. Anyone's word in the country. Your word is your bond. But then you go back on your word when you don't pay your rent. That negotiation on how that is settled should be between the landlord and the tenant. If the landlord chooses to give that tenant some more time so they can figure it out, then that's good, and that's goodness. And in most cases, that happens. But if there's a failure to pay, then the agreement is over because of a breach of contract. In most cases now, we have lawyers writing multi-page contracts for just a single apartment. Boy, when I came here to do my job representing House District 63, I think it was 6 to 8 pages I had to go through, writing, initialing, reviewing, initialing, line after line after line. I thought, what a mess. Because I'll make a handshake deal and bring my rent every month on time. Because that's how we do it where I'm from. And if there's a problem, I'll be the first one to go up and tell them, I got a problem, can you give me some grace? In most cases, that grace will come if you ask, if it is a legitimate, fair deal. And one party's not trying to get over on the other party, either intentionally or unintentionally. So the first issue is the private property right infringement. The next issue is the contractual infringement, because the deal's a deal. Well, maybe it's not. Maybe the state needs to get involved and undo the deal because the state knows better. Should the state be this involved? And what are the second and third order effects of this for those small landlords that are out there on low margins? I'll tell you right now, ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot of people that say, I want out. I'm just going to sell my property and get out of here. If Colorado's going to go this way because of the heavy hand of government trying to meddle in everything they can meddle in and infringe upon our private property rights for the land and the property that we own and the rents that we're trying to collect, particularly for the small mom and pops, they're done. So what happens to those homes? Do they get taken off the market? Do they get demolished? Do they turn into commercial space? Does the housing go away? I don't know. But there will be second and third order effects, and I promise you they're not going to be good. They're not going to be good to the bill sponsor. You're trying to help, but there's a lot of people you're going to hurt with this type of policy. Why do we want to continue this cycle of overburdening landlords and make them consider selling their properties? Why? Many of them ask, why is this happening? Why are we under attack in this state? What did we do wrong? Many of them are good people. But the heavy hand of government's going to help them. Now, we ran a lot of amendments, and I don't know if we're going to talk about them all. I thought there was very good common sense amendments. And during second reading, all we heard was no, 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 no. The good ideas from my caucus were kicked to the curb, with a few exceptions. And those came from pleas from landlords all over the state, eastern Colorado, western Colorado. But did we listen? We even come here on third reading and we have this interesting affair as we sit here and wonder what we're doing with another amendment. All this stuff should have been settled in committee and on second readings, with a clean bill coming to this chamber on thirds. But this is so contentious and so divisive and so difficult that we can't even get the bill cleaned up before thirds. For that reason, for those reasons, and others that I'm not going to take the time to mention, because I know we have a lot of work to do, I'm going to be a no on this amendment, supporting the rights of private property owners the rights of landlords, the rights that are written in contractual law that should be upheld and not infringed upon. For those three rights, specifically, I will be a no. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Bottoms.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I love following Representative Holtorf. I feel like we go from 33 to 45. Some of you have to be, whatever. So, this bill's been really convoluted from the beginning. We tried to kick it back. It's so confusing. There were amendments inside of amendments inside of amendments. This bill is, for the first thing, it's not ready to be presented. It's a messy bill. It's written messy. It has been amended messy. And I don't know if that's intentional or not, but it has been. And so the second thing, again, our entire side over here keeps coming up and saying this, but we're getting email after email after email from landlords that are saying they're done. You do this and we're out. So now we have this huge gap in the amount of places that can be rented. We have a vacuum that needs to be filled where we need more places to rent, more houses, more apartments, more all kinds of things to be rented so that it can be filled. And what we're doing as of day one of this bill is we're causing people to pull out of the market. So now there's going to be less. So we've accomplished one thing so far, less. We're going to have less spaces for less people to rent because of this. That's in the first 6 months to a year. The next thing that's going to happen in the year to 2 to 3 years is we're going to be forcing renters out because of these extremely bad laws. These laws attack people. They don't help. You may give somebody that doesn't want to pay their rent a few extra months. That's not even good overall ethical direction of our country. So you give a few people an extra few months, and then when that happens, you force 5,000 other landlords out of the business because they can't afford it. So we're going to be causing landlords to pull out, and that's not anecdotal. We can give you names, we can give you places, and we can give you addresses. The second thing is you're going to be forcing out because they cannot operate with the silliness that we're producing here. And then the last part of this, is it just me or am I hearing angels?
My apologies, Representative.
Oh, okay. I'm a pastor, so I hear these every now and then. I don't know. So then the other side of this is we're changing the entire market to accommodate a handful of people. As we will lose landlords, we will lose spaces. And what's going to happen is now 5 years from now, we can come back and take all the testimonies and all the votes that are being recorded on this and say, look what you did. We now have less. We have less spaces. 10 people got that didn't have to pay their rent. That helped everybody. But now we have thousands and thousands of less spaces to rent in the process. This is a horrible bill. It's poorly written, should not be on the floor, and I urge a no vote against this on all levels.
Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I agree with my colleagues. This bill has been a disaster. It traps people's private property. It creates a never-ending cycle for somebody to keep your property. This bill puts all the onus on the landlord, even if the landlord has done nothing wrong. And it creates this concept that contracts between people mean absolutely nothing. That we do not care if we have a deal. We don't care if we even put it on paper. Throw it out the window and let's have it their way. We've offered many good amendments. In fact, one we offered was L23, exempting a dwelling unit of a residential premise if the residential premise includes less than 5 dwelling units. In all the sloppiness of this bill and all the amendments, we were told that was included. But the bill specifically says that it does not include dwelling units of 5 dwelling units or less. So this whole thing has been a disaster from the beginning. It is a shame we are not cleaning it up and doing it appropriately. I ask you all for a no vote on this bill. Thank you.
Representative Winter.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I also urge a no vote on this bill. As you all know, I come up here and speak for my constituents. I've received numerous emails that look at this as an attack on private property rights, attack on the contracts that they have in good faith with people, and whether it's meant to be or not, this is an attack on the mom and pop, and they don't like how they're being vilified. Like I said yesterday, and I will say again, it looks like a lot of these housing bills that we've seen come through here are a direct attack on private property, and that they want to drive people out of the private property market and push housing more to government-run housing, and that's not what this country's founded on, so I urge a no vote. Thank you.
Representative Bradley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I, too, have gotten blown up with emails from residents in Douglas County. You guys, these people can't even afford to live in Douglas County right now. We have teachers that live in Denver that have to drive to Douglas County and students that live in Denver that have to drive to Douglas County. I'm just going to read an email, one of the many that I received. Please vote no on House Bill 231171 of a tenant from a residential premises. This bill will be detrimental to the rental market in Colorado and the single-family rental market especially. This bill will drive away small investors, reduce rental inventory, and place an undue burden on mom-and-pop property owners who want to regain possession of their property. This bill does that in the following ways: by limiting our ability to evict tenants for reasons except those spelled out in the bill, and by repealing the current law regarding notices to vacate. This bill creates an unattainable situation where offering a tenant a lease of any term creates a perpetual lease if that lease or the owner's circumstances change. This is especially true for small landlords and property owners. By directly limiting the property rights of owners and by requiring them to perpetually forfeit their property once they place it on the rental market. When a property becomes a rental, they would be required to pay 2 to 3 months of rent to get their property back, and only in 3 very specific situations. Outside of these situations, there would be no way to remove a tenant from the property. This bill will drive small investors and individual property owners out of the rental market. They cannot cover the burdensome costs of owning a house in Colorado, leaving only large and corporate landlords to control the rental market. This is already the trend. Developers who build neighborhoods and instead of selling, self-manage the properties, and large corporations who are buying out property management companies. HB 231171 will only accelerate the detrimental trend and will create unmanageable financial hardship for small landlords in the state. And I just want to go back because I worked during the whole COVID crisis, but what we don't remember is the burden that we put on landlords during COVID that are now trying to reap the consequences of that and regain their rent. And what we're doing is taking that away from them. So I'm going to quote a summary from a paper that surveyed over 2,500 rental property owners in 10 cities across the United States to determine the impact of COVID-19 on landlords' rental collection and business behavior. Yearly rent collection was down significantly in 2020 relative to 2019, both within and across rental markets. And an increasing number of owners have a large share of their portfolio behind on rent. The share of landlords collecting 90% or more of yearly rent fell 30% from 2019 to 2020. 10% of all landlords collected less than half of their yearly rent in 2020, with smaller landlords, 1 to 5 units, most likely to have tenants deeply behind on rental payments, While instances of severe non-payment grew the most for mid-sized owners, small owners had the highest exposure to deep tenant arrears because they were more likely to face this challenge prior to the pandemic. In each of the study cities, we observed 3 to 4-fold increases in the proportion of landlords owned 10% or more of charged rent by 2020's end. A large share of landlords in the coastal cities of our sample reported being owed 50% or more of charged 2020 rent. Owners of all sizes adjusted their practices during the pandemic, with dramatic increases in the share of landlords granting tenants rent extensions or forgiving back rent. The share of all landlords granting rental extensions and forgiving back rent increased in 2020 relative to 2019, 15 to 48% and 3 to 21% respectively. These findings cannot be fully explained by decreased 2020 rental collection, indicating the pandemic affected landlord behavior above and beyond its impact on tenants' ability to make rent. So I'm not going to keep quoting from the study, but these landlords are already experiencing such loss, and now we're going to put even more regulations on top of them. And tenants in my county are scared to death that there is going to be less of a supply and more of a demand, and they're not going to have anywhere to live. So I urge a no vote on this bill. Thank you.
Representative Bockenfeld.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Folks, this bill is still half-baked. We are a kind and generous country. We accept refugees into this country all the time. Some of these refugees speak very unique languages. Even the sausage making that was occurring here today hasn't gotten this bill right. Do you really want a landlord who's trying to assist these refugee populations coming in to start thinking about, can I afford really to lease to these folks anymore because they might make up the secondary language that I don't have a translator for? This is not what we should be doing on third reading. This bill is half-baked. It's not done yet. Let's vote no on this bill, and let's come back and get it right.
Representative Soper.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, I appreciate all the amendments that have been offered at every step of the way. There's very few bills that we see where the way it was introduced and the way it's currently looking are vastly different. And that does show that it really did need a lot more work, certainly in the Committee of Reference. I hope they continue to work on it in the Senate. But as the Republican caucus, we offered a number of really good amendments, and I just really want to highlight the one offered by my colleague from Grand Junction, where he said that if you were to provide 90 days notice, you'd be relieved of the obligation to pay relocation assistance. That is a very generous idea being thrown out there. It's the idea that if you're a landlord and you're providing 90 days notice before the expiration of the lease term, that you're not going to allow the tenant to renew the lease, absolutely the landlord should be relieved of that obligation. What we're doing in this particular bill is we're amending the part of statute that talks about when your lease comes to an end. And within the statute, there are certain notification timelines that have to be met. In those timelines, of course, there's a may. And so failing the contract being explicit, then the statute lays out the thresholds. So like 90 days if it's a year, and then it continues on down for different types of contracts. Normally the contract would prevail. What the bill is saying for just cause eviction is that instead of the contract prevailing, and instead of the landlord and tenant being able to come to a natural end of the contract, the bill is saying that when the end of your contract comes, one party to the contract can still be on the financial hook for up to 90 days further for the other party in that contract. That's not something we see in any other part of Colorado contract law. This is, to me, a worrisome step to go down. If we can change the contract law on landlord-tenant relations, we could certainly change this in other areas of contract as well. But there is a very pragmatic side, and I just want to pivot back to my good colleague's amendment that he had offered. If there's going to be 90 days notice provided, even 60 days, shoot, even 30 days, that tenant, that's a long time to be able to find another place to live. That's being very generous. We're not talking about a hostile eviction where all of a sudden you find yourself in front of a court. This is just the end of a contract. And this is the part of the bill that is by far the most troublesome for us. What we argued throughout second reading and found ourselves here today on third readings. I mean, we tried to exempt out 5 units or less. That's to protect the small guy, the person who may have an extra home that they're wanting to rent out. Your parents may have passed away, you may own their home, you'd like to be able to rent that. All of a sudden, you're caught up by everything that's in this bill. And I did appreciate the sponsor's amendment to try to carve out the smaller player. But it's also quite clunky to have a very complex financial threshold and where you're calculating your mortgage and your expenses to see what exactly that particular unit may generate. Within a year's time, it may be very difficult to determine the expenses of that particular home in light of your overall budget. You may have a mortgage on your other home, and you're using your rental home to finance that mortgage. You may still have student debt that you're actually trying to supplement that with. So there's a lot more questions than just taking one individual home and saying, how much money does this one individual home generate? If you have your primary home and your one rental home, that's part of the larger family budget. And that's far more complex than just parsing off the one rental home. And that's another reason why we find it troubling what's being done here. The bill, I do believe, the sponsors came from a good place to try to rectify some bad stories that we heard. But I fear that this will create more unintended consequences. It will cause more people to say, you know what, instead of taking the home that used to be my parents' when they were alive and going ahead and turning that into a rental, it's going to cause many more Coloradans to say, ooh, our laws have changed in such a way that it really is only leaning towards the tenants and that there's no mechanism for the landlords to have protection as well. And so it becomes inequitable. And I think we're going to see fewer rental units on the market as a result of this bill. I worry, as we're trying to get more homes for people to rent, what this could lead to. So I'm going to be a no vote. Thank you.
Representative Frizzell.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I appreciate my colleagues' characterization of this bill. The unintended consequences of this particular piece of legislation are really considerable. And one thing that we haven't talked a lot about that I would like to bring to your attention as you're contemplating your vote is the fact that short-term rentals were in the amendments removed from the original bill language, or they were specifically excluded, I guess it would be more appropriate. And for those of you, Castle Rock is not a resort community. I know that's shocking. But many of us here do come from resort communities where there is already an extraordinary housing shortage. There is a shortage of long-term rental properties for workers and just for people who love their communities. And one of the reasons for that is short-term rentals. Because property owners have found it a lot more lucrative to rent their properties, whether it's a single-family residence or a condo or a townhouse, on VRBO. It's a lot more lucrative. So what this bill is going to do to these communities that are already struggling is it's going to make those long-term rental property owners move more and more towards short-term rentals. This is real. I'm not making this up. I'm an appraiser. I have a lot of real estate experience, 25 years. So if you were to ask a realtor in your community, is Lisa just blowing smoke? No, I'm not. I think they'll say no. This is an important thing that we're talking about here. Unintended consequences. I'm pretty sure, and again, this is just based on my own opinion, my own experience, but if I own rental property here in the state of Colorado, and some of these bills are signed by the governor, at the end of the day, I'm going to put my property on the market and I'm going to get out. It's just not worth it. I don't think I would be alone. I think that we will see a significant loss of single-family rental properties available to those who don't want to be in an apartment. They don't want to be in a condo. They don't want to be in a townhouse. They want a place for their dog to run around in the backyard. They want a place for their kids to play. They want to be part of a community, part of a neighborhood. The single-family rental market in this state is considerable. Then there's the mom and pop operations. We've talked, you've heard a little bit from my colleagues about what about them? The amendment that was introduced exempting small complexes, small complexes, 5 units and less. Those are not owned by REITs. Those are just your next door neighbor. That has not been addressed. Then let's talk about the risk that this bill creates, the risk for institutional apartment owners. So just thinking through this, I'm not an institutional apartment owner. Darn, I wish I were. But I'm not. But if I were, and I knew that my ability to increase rents were restricted, I would load up my rent rates at the front end because I may not be able to raise rents for a while. That's what I would do. And we all know that rent rates are market-driven. They're driven by supply and demand, and they're driven by what the owner can get. This would mean that the cost for everybody is going to increase. When we're talking about this being one of the least affordable states in the country for housing, and we're talking about raising rates. I'm not going to go into construction of new projects, how this could affect investors from wanting to enter into this market, because I think that's been talked about. That's a problem. Again, supply and demand. If our supply does not increase, we're going to continue to see rents increase. And the last thing, and I don't know if this is an unintended consequence or not, but this is just, I think, speaking to some of the problems with this bill and the way it's been constructed. This bill has been constructed out of good intentions, and I believe that. But the wording of what a substantially identical rental agreement is is completely undefined. What does that mean? Does that mean that it's subject to litigation? Does that mean that the landlord can never increase rent? The terms can never change? What if they get a dog? Or a cat? Or both? This is completely vague. And it opens this particular bill to a lot of speculation. Because of these reasons that I've highlighted, these unintended consequences that I know that you're listening with rapt attention to, I will ask for your no vote today. I certainly will be one. Thank you.
Representative Catlin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's still an honor to serve with you.
And it is still an honor to serve with you.
Thank you. Members, I'm here today. I want to talk about broad brushes and detail brushes. When we saw this bill in committee, it seems to be a broad brush attempt to try and fix some problems that may be not as big as what we think they might be. I'm from out in the country. You all know that. So we don't have 100-unit or massive apartment building complexes in my district. And there may be some bad actors in that that sector of the industry. I'm not going to say there are or there aren't. But I think what happened with this bill is that we started thinking about large facilities, large areas where a lot of people rent. And you know, there's terms, slumlords and some of those kind of things that we've heard. But I don't think the majority of landlords are like that. I don't have much experience with that, although I am a tenant over here in Denver. And my contract needed a lawyer to look at it. I wish I'd have known you then. Because, you know, it was multi-pages. And I can see where people get confused. I can see where a typical consumer might get mixed up. But what I'm getting at today is I don't think, and it may be just my life experience, it may be the way I try to approach things, I don't think that there are a lot of poor landlords. I have very little experience in that multi-unit world. But I do have experience in communities like I represent. And people own these properties, and they're the ones that are trying very hard to keep that tenant in that unit. They don't want the vacancy factor in their single family or duplex or triplex to go up for a number of reasons. One, it may be making the payments on that one or something else. So the idea that we would just kick people out doesn't happen in that marketplace. Tenants come to the landlord and say, I can't make my rent today, but I will be able to in 10 days. And landlords say, okay. Or they let them make payments. And I know of that. I've owned a couple of rental buildings, rental houses. And it's a transaction based on the people rather than the document. And I think we've taken this idea so far that a lot of the folks that are trying to do something that will help them financially and their futures, and also keep tenants in their buildings, and keep roofs over families' houses, have been ignored in this. We came down and talked about 5-unit limit. Really, I think that would have been common sense. I understand we're trying to write law that will cover everything, but none of us have been able to do that, folks. We write these big bills, and the next year, we got to come back and add something, take something out. We have to tinker with it after we've placed it. And I think that's one of the things that we missed in this bill, was talking about people that own a few rentals, maybe to put their kid through college, or maybe to give enough money to where they'll be able to retire comfortably. Truthfully, I've looked at myself thinking, before I got here, thinking that I would buy some houses and that would be some passive income for me as I retired. I'll tell you personally, I'm rethinking that completely, because I don't understand all that's being written in this bill. And I don't think a lot of landlords understand what's being written into this bill. And coupled with other pieces of legislation that have come forward, there's a lot of confusion, a lot of fear, and a lot of worry about what's going to happen to us. I know that all law is written for the few bad ones, for the bad people. 90% of the law is written for 10% of the people, right? This is one that I think we've taken too far. I really think we've not given credit to the people who own property, maintain property, and keep a roof over others' heads. But if a hammer is the only thing you have in your toolbox, that's the one you use. This is a hammer. I know that the train has probably already left the station. But this is one of those bills that I would like to ask you to consider. Can we use a scalpel? Can we use a detail brush versus a broad brush to cover everyone? That would be my ask. Today, I'm asking you to please vote no on this bill.
Representative Hartsook.
Thank you so kindly, Madam Speaker. You know, when you write contracts, after I retired from or actually when I joined the Army, I signed a contract. I raised my right hand, said, I will. And everything after that, I had to do, and the government told me what to do. I retired from the Army, and I went into doing business development for a small business. We wrote lots of contracts, sometimes with small businesses, sometimes with large businesses. And those contracts were binding. They had fiscal responsibilities, they had personnel responsibilities, but they had responsibilities nonetheless. We had to adhere to them. And if somebody didn't adhere to them, or if you didn't adhere to your contract in the military, you would end up in court. Sometimes being court-martialed, but in the civilian world, you end up in court. We have attorneys and judges for that. That is their job. Our job in this legislative body is to craft laws. Yet when we craft laws that are designed, as my previous colleague was just talking about, using a hammer, it's the one-size-fits-all. If somebody does something wrong, then punish that individual, punish that company, punish that group. Do not punish everyone out there and hold them all responsible for what someone does wrong. I remember, and I can't remember the name of the movie, but he's got that funny little line where he's the landlord. They call him slumlord because he's always in there, give me the money, give me the money. That's all he cared about. And he finally ends up in front of the judge, and the judge orders him to live in the apartments that he had been owning and managing. And of course, they were horrible, they were run down and not non-functional, but that was his punishment. He had to live in there for 30 days. And kind of the idea of the movie was, A, it was fun, but the lesson learned is, no, you're going to live in the same mess that you created. Ultimately, in the end, though, it goes to the judge. The judge is the one that decides in the court. That's what the courts decide. Contracts are written for a reason, to make the parties not only agreeable, but make it binding. When we as a legislative body change those laws and add lots of stuff out there that increases the burden, and having been in business development, I've watched the stack of requirements continue to rise from a legislative perspective. It makes it harder and harder for people, the average person, to do the right thing. Not because they don't want to do the right thing, but because they can't possibly read and understand everything that's out there. Now, it's great business if you're the attorney, because then they're going to get called in and get paid a fee to look at this. But that's not how life should be. Life should be where we can read and understand basic, simple contracts, basic negotiations. During our military career, when we owned when we owned a house and we moved, we rented it. Usually it was to another military family that came on in, and then they would rent it for 2 or 3 years, and then they would move, we would rent it to someone else. Are there people that do bad things? Are there people that gouge others? Absolutely. Do they take advantage of them? Absolutely. But we shouldn't be writing bills that target everyone. There is a certain amount of responsibility that people should have out there. We should not be legislating responsibility. If you do something wrong, then you will appear in front of the court and the judge will make their ruling. I don't think it's our job to legislate responsibility either. We should be setting an example versus making things so convoluted that people have a hard time figuring out what are they doing, and are they going to make a mistake and then be held liable for something when they try to do something right, but they miss something. We should not be looking to create gotchas out there. If something is that way, then we should not be legislating it. So there's a host of reasons that I would urge you to vote no on this. But us as a body should not be legislating those kinds of actions that are out there. We have plenty of laws in the books, and if people do things wrong, then they should appear before the judge and let that judge render their judgment upon the accused. Then the attorneys can have their say, and the judge will then have their say. But we as a body should not be legislating more and more things to make it more and more complicated. So I would urge you to vote no on this. Thank you so kindly.
Representative DeGraff.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is a privilege to serve with you.
And a privilege to serve with you.
Thank you. I'm always surprised at how few people know Thomas Sowell, the eminent Dr. Thomas Sowell. And I'm going to use this quote here: in politics, never assume that something is insane, it will not be done. And this bill falls in that category. The sponsor noted that this type of legislation is being promoted in D.C. The issues that we're having on rentals are being created by the administration in D.C. On day one, the edicts went into place to restrict and start driving up the cost of energy. That has caused supply chain blackouts. That has caused inflation. That is the problem. What this bill is trying to do, again, is trying to paper over the problems that legislation has created. I looked at getting my electrical panel replaced in a house. 6 months for an electrical panel. All of the electrical is backlogged. In order to get supply, they are metering out who gets what when in order to keep the chain going. The houses that are being created are the ones that were approved years ago. The supply chain is messed up. It's legislation that is accomplished by bodies like this that has done it, because we've gone past the force market straight into the FUBAR market, and now we're stuck. And now we're going to try to paper over all of the problems that have been created. The free market is a market of ideas, and some will win and some will fail. The forced market is enforced by guns. The forced market is the market that's imposed by this body. And that's not hyperbole.
Representative DeGraff, please stay to the bill.
Yes, ma'am, I think I am speaking to the bill because this bill is forcing the market down a path that will drive more inflation. And this bill will be enforced by people with guns, by either sheriffs or tax collectors or whoever. Talking to landlords that I'm hearing from, they could raise the rates, but this body has already looked at that. Like, oh, the legislation that we're going to do is going to cause rates, so we're going to restrict that ability. And landlords cannot keep ahead of the good intentions being imposed by this body. We've already had another issue with the inflation is so many of the properties have gone corporate because of the inflation. And so real property was the way to hedge inflation, so they bought up all the properties. And you know what? A lot of people were willing to sell because legislation had said, hey, it would be a great idea during this pandemic that we created if everybody didn't have to pay rent, but the people that owned the property still had to pay their mortgages. And so they went under. And now we have big corporate buyers that have bought up the properties. So the banks kept charging the landlords, and they said, and the landlords looked out at this body and said, man, those people really enjoyed a good pandemic, so this is probably going to happen again. And they sold. The consequences are evident. They're imminent. The sponsors have indicated that they are not unintentional. Because of the inflation caused by the manufactured energy crisis and a war on carbon, that will accomplish absolutely nothing. This bill will move us to less inventory, higher taxes, because when these properties go to buy another bill, when they're transferred over by eminent domain and they're transferred over to nonprofit organizations, they're not going to pay taxes. Now you're not going to have enough taxes. The chances that this body is going to slow down on spending is laughable. And so you're going to need more taxes. It is laughable. This is the jackboot of good intentions. This is lawfare waged through legislation now. This is legfare, and we're waging it. We know that all these schemes... Yes, ma'am.
Representative DeGraff, please stay focused on the content of the bill.
I'm trying to discuss the consequences of the bill. Builders are not going to build with this bill. Landlords will not be able to handle their rent. They are going to stop renting. Eventually, when I talk to my neighbor, who's not exactly politically involved, his first thought was, whoa, I got to warn my friend who does all these rentals. He needs to get ahead of this. He might just have to sell. He's also from New York City. And so the immediate, when I said about this bill, he said, well, they just handled that in New York City by doing what? Condos. All of the rentals went straight to condos. Not all, most, lots. A lot of the buildings went out. And then eventually, the property is worth more than the building, and the building is more of a hassle than value, and so here comes the bulldozer, and there goes all your rentals. So it is a guarantee that this bill will result in less housing available. And then you're going to come with another bill to try to impose something to make people follow it. Landlords want tenants. They don't want empty houses. So when there's a contract that's signed, when you sign a 36-month contract, that contract says, in 36 months, I will move out. If you sign a 24-month contract, that contract says in 24 months, I will move out. Your notice of eviction, of termination of your contract, comes when you sign that contract. It happens on the day. There's no surprises. You can set your clock by it. You can put it on your calendar that when you sign a contract, that property, that agreement to be on that property ends. I've rented lots of houses. I also fixed them up when I was in there. The landlords came to me and asked to make sure that to see if I was going to renew. This bill will ensure irresponsible behavior. So there was so much stakeholding, but did you ask every landlord? Did you get the approval of every landlord to seize, to deprive life, liberty, or property, in this case, without due process? Because this is depriving of property without due process. And the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, protects the individual, not some corporate group of stakeholders. It protects the individual. The difference between a democracy and a republic is that the republic protects the individual from the mob. The democracy feeds him to it. This bill is messy, 5 pages out of 12. Pretty much 50% of the bill was rewritten with that amendment. That pretty much rewrites the entire bill. If anything says this is not fit for prime time, it's rewriting the entire bill. Those 5 pages touched every one of the other pages. They changed the intent, they changed the outcome, they give special privileges to the government, who the other bills that we've had are going to be buying up with NGOs that are going to be not paying taxes to create more of a domino effect. Land is going to be snapped up by donor class investors. Political donor class investors taking advantage of eminent domain transferred to nonprofits who will then have a monopoly advantage by not paying the taxes that have jumped by 20%, which is driving up rent, which is driving people out of the market. If the body politic wants to do something about rent, drive down the property taxes. And we can do that. That's something that we could do in here. We could reduce the property taxes by going back to Tabor. But you hate Tabor because it restricts your good intentions. The small mom and pops are out, construction will be done. We already know that. Your availability will be down. Your overall costs will go up. I agree, these are not unintended consequences. This is a collusion between government and corporation. There is a term for that type of political arrangement, and I've been advised not to say it.
Representative.
But I will be done. But I will urge you from the most basic economic 101.
Representative
you
DeGraff,
stop.
your time has expired.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Minority Leader Lynch.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think we're going to break this thing before this session's over. As with all these bills, I always look at what the intent is. And I appreciate the intent of the sponsors, which was to look out for the little guy, to look out and come to the rescue of those who are being abused by the big guy. The problem is I don't think we spend enough time on this bill defining who the big guy is. Because sometimes the big guy is somebody that has worked their entire life. They've decided, I don't want my money in Wall Street. I don't want to trust my fate, my retirement to somebody or something that I can't control. I'm going to put sweat equity into a building, and I'm going to rent that out, and I'm going to be able to retire once that's paid for with the payments from that. We came to the table with some options to try to carve out that hypothetical boogeyman big guy, and we were unsuccessful there. I think there might be a case for some corporate entities that might deserve some of this legislation, but this didn't do that. This was a broad brush sweep that just took everybody into consideration, and that's one of my biggest concerns on this. The other is that, this bill is filled with all kinds of unintended consequences. Just just to try to protect a small class of folks in this state. I don't think that that's good legislation. And then I also just look at this, why, in a time when we've been given direction from our governor, direction from our constituents that we need to create affordable housing, we need to do something to give relief to people. Why would we do anything from this body that could potentially harm that effort? This bill does that. This bill also needed a lot more work on it. We saw that whenever you see a 5-page amendment on your desk, that's time. It's time to go back to the drawing board. So I would strongly urge a no vote on this, because let's think about who the big guy is that this bill is attempting to regulate and take control over. And let's try to do what's right for the citizens of Colorado and not do anything that will hurt our efforts to try to provide more affordable housing for them. I urge a no vote.
Representative Gonzalez Gutierrez.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I really appreciate members being so intentional and engaged in this bill. Members, I've talked to you all about the work that I've done over the last 20 years with kids and families in our communities, kids and families that are faced with the most vulnerable situations, helping them access things like housing, food, behavioral health care. I will say that the majority of the families that I work with who are faced with some of the most difficult decisions in their lives, the biggest priority for them is housing. Housing instability is a huge issue for them. It's important that stable housing provides stability for families. When families lack stable housing, the entire family's health and well-being is impacted. Without safe and stable housing, kids struggle to learn in school, employment is difficult to secure and maintain, and health outcomes plummet, and so many other negative factors emerge. Members, renters and homeowners deserve safe, affordable housing. In 2022, over 700,000 Colorado households were renters, with over 160,000 of those households being extremely low income. And data shows that eviction filings tend to be concentrated in neighborhoods where residents are predominantly lower income and come from communities of color, and are particularly vulnerable to involuntary displacement. And this is something that isn't new. It has been happening for generations to these communities, members. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to level the playing field. The state is experiencing a housing crisis in every area of this state. It is impacting our businesses and our tourism industries as they struggle to find workers who can afford to live where they work. It is impacting our teachers. I will mind you, our educators support this bill. And our home health care workers who struggle to make a livable wage and find housing where they work. How many times have we heard stories of home health care workers, of teachers living in their cars? But again, this isn't something that is new. Instead, the impact is more widespread. I want to just touch real quick on the burden that was mentioned around the pandemic and COVID. I will say that this body approved rental assistance that went straight to landlords, that went straight to the folks that are paying the mortgages so that they weren't burdened. We secured a process to make sure that they got their mortgages paid. Just cause eviction legislation is the best way to prevent first-time homelessness, keep families housed, and put less pressure on the public benefit system. The last thing I just want to mention, in my work with the families that I work with, I think about a family that came to our attention through a truancy case. You would think, oh, this kid isn't just going to school, or the family's not getting them to school, but it was a bigger issue than that. This is about housing stability. And I can tell you the majority of truancy cases are because of that. Because families don't know where they're going to sometimes lay their head at night because they're being threatened with eviction unjustly. We provided heated blankets to them a few months ago after learning that the family had not had heat in their apartment since August of 2022. The family had requested maintenance and learned that the entire apartment complex was going without heat and was not repairable because the system was too old. They were told that they could not use a portable heater because it was a safety hazard in the building. And with below freezing temperatures for most of December and January, this family had to spend most of those nights at the Coliseum to keep their children safe, healthy, and warm. The family and many other families in the complex were fearful of retaliation, that they could be evicted and become homeless if they proceeded with bringing these concerns forward. This is what we're talking about. If these types of issues are brought forward, they come to the end of their lease, and the landlord doesn't want to address it right now, they can be evicted. This bill would provide these families with the protections needed to keep them housed. I'm proud to be a part of this bill and proud of the work that we've done, and I ask you to vote yes.
Representative Mabry.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, it's important when we're voting on this bill that we're clear about what it does and what it does not do. We heard a lot of talk about renters who were behind on their rent, renters who are violating their leases, renters who are creating problems. This bill does not provide any protections for those renters. Landlords will still be able to evict renters who are behind on their rent. Specifically, we have singled out every single existing for-cause reason to remove a tenant as not being covered under this bill. If a tenant isn't paying a rent, if a tenant is violating a lease, if a tenant is breaking the rules, causing a nuisance for others, this bill does not apply. So let's talk about when this bill does apply. I'm going to tell you guys a story from a case that a coworker of mine worked on earlier this year that was one of the big motivations for bringing this policy. This legislation applies when a landlord is removing a tenant for no reason at all. Landlords exploit this loophole to retaliate against tenants, to discriminate against tenants, and to harass tenants. So earlier this year, we're working on a case. Young woman lives in the Denver metro area. She's renting a house, and her landlord starts sexually harassing her and says, hey, if you do favors, you don't have to pay your rent. She, of course, said no, rebuffed this gentleman. Then the landlord, she'd lived there for multiple years, by the way. Landlord every single year extends the lease. This year, the landlord said, no, I'm not extending your lease. The young woman went to college close to where she lived. She needed to live in that community. So when the case was taken to eviction court, my colleague laid out all these facts. The judge at the end of the case said, I understand that there was misbehavior here, sex discrimination, gender discrimination. Those protections do not prevent a removal based on a lease termination. There was nothing the judge could do. There was nothing the judge could do. So this woman was retaliated against because she stood up for herself while being sexually harassed. Another case I worked on earlier this year, young family, young black family. They live here in the metro area. The landlord and the maintenance person were calling them the N-word. We got it on recording. We played it in court. In fact, the other side tried to say we couldn't bring it in court because it was hearsay, and the judge in a moment said, the judge in that moment said, Mr. Mabry, that is racial discrimination. Can you please explain why you can let that in on the hearsay rule? And I did. I did explain why it was let in on the hearsay rule, and the judge agreed. And in my closing statement, I said, Your Honor, you said this was racial discrimination. You said this was racial discrimination. Therefore, there should not be an eviction here. The judge said in a lease termination case, racial discrimination is not a defense to eviction. So, there's also been a lot of talk about the process on this bill. We brought a lot of amendments. We brought a lot of amendments on this bill because we wanted to make sure that this policy worked best for Colorado. 5 states have just cause for eviction policy. 5. New Jersey has had it since 1974. New Jersey's just cause for eviction policy is far more expansive than ours. They didn't carve out the sale of the home like we did, working with the realtors to get them to neutral. Anybody who's ever worked on a landlord-tenant bill in this body knows how hard that is to get the realtors to neutral. We have been stakeholding this bill, and that is why the process has been complicated and why we brought a lot of amendments, because we are being responsive. On the small mom and pop piece, I just want to note, there's been talk about how the formula is complicated. The way that the bill is written is the presumption is that the landlord is not going to have to pay relocation assistance unless they make almost $80,000 a year in profit. That's the presumption. The presumption isn't going to be that the landlord has to pay it. The presumption is going to be that they don't have to pay it, and then the tenant is going to have to prove that in court, where 97% of landlords have attorneys and 3% of renters have attorneys. So the idea that this is going to be a massive burden on the landlords, I think, is something we really have to push back on. So I just want to close. The experience of losing one's home has been linked to all sorts of horrible consequences: higher job loss, debt, suicide. I dropped out of high school after I was evicted. Families are forced to relocate to worse neighborhoods. They're forced out of their neighborhoods. And just cause eviction protections help the lowest socioeconomic status residents remain in gentrifying neighborhoods. We're going to bring a zoning bill this year that is going to lead to displacement. This is the anti-displacement policy. This is anti-displacement policy. The Biden administration released a blueprint for renters' rights in this country, and this blueprint has 5 major pillars. And the last one specifically says that states should pass good cause eviction protections. These policies have widespread benefits, and we've seen them in place for years and years and years in this country. I will note that Washington State just recently passed just cause for eviction policy 2 years ago. We heard how this will lead to people switching to short-term rentals, rents going up. That had not seen in Washington State. Rents have actually gone up at a higher rate in Colorado than they have in Washington State since Washington State passed their good cause for eviction policy. Ultimately, this is an important tenant protection that can provide stability, predictability at the end of a lease term, and mitigate the harms caused by eviction. And as we do everything we can to build more housing and to make sure that people can live where they work, this is an essential part of that puzzle, and we urge an aye vote. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, the motion before us is the passage of House Bill 1171 as amended. Mr. Schiebel, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Please close the machine. With 38 aye, 26 no, and 1 excused, House Bill 1171 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Thank you for your approval. We ask for no clapping in the gallery. Please close the machine. Members, that concludes third readings. Any further announcements or introductions? Representative Michelson-Janay.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wanted to let you all know that you're invited to the Colorado Pharmacists Society Pharmacy Day at the Capitol Legislator Reception. And you can meet with pharmacies, pharmacy techs, and pharmacy students to discuss bills and topics related to healthcare, food and drinks provided. Tonight, 4:30 to 7 at Colorado's Health Capitol, 303 East 17th Avenue, Suite 400. See you there.
Representative Epps.
Is it still morning? Good morning, Mr. Shebel. We have a tribute, and we request that it be read at length.
Mr. Shebel, please read our tribute.
The House of Representatives convened in the 74th General Assembly hereby recognizes Colorado's home care workers and state employees. The Colorado House of Representatives is proud to honor Colorado's home care workers and state employees for their hard work and sacrifices to keep our state going, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. Across our state, care workers provide support that allows our aging loved ones and Coloradans with disabilities to live in their own homes with dignity and independence. Home care workers provide compassionate, skilled care in people's most vulnerable moments. They deserve to be valued and respected for their important work. Every day, state employees care for our veterans, repair our bridges and roads, protect our water and public lands, and provide many more essential services. We recognize their commitment and tireless efforts to improve public services that help ensure Colorado's future is bright and equitable for all. The Colorado House of Representatives is proud to recognize and thank these essential workers for their important and ongoing contributions that keep our communities safe, clean, healthy, and cared for. On request of Representatives Elizabeth Epps and Elizabeth Velasco, given this 15th day of March 2023, State Capitol, Denver.
Representative Epps.
Yes, colleagues, today is indeed COENS and SEIU Local 105 Lobby Day at our Capitol. COENS, I'm sure you know this, but Colorado Workers for Innovative and New Solutions, the state employees union, workers with your favorite agencies, divisions, and departments, DOC, DORA, CDLE, CDOT, DHS, Higher Ed, and more. SEIU Local 105, the Service Employees International Union, our janitors, security officers, airport workers, healthcare workers, home care workers, and more. Home care workers, I was a home care worker, what feels like a lifetime ago, and what feels like a slightly shorter, but still a lifetime ago, I moved to Colorado to be a state employee. So it is both my personal and professional delight to welcome and to invite you to join me in welcoming our COENS and SEIU 105 workers. Colleagues, Mr. Shebel read the tribute at length, at brief length, but I want to give this, and I will, of course, give this tribute to our friends. But we in this, the 74th General Assembly, we are called to do much more than just pay tribute. We can't just pay tribute. We must make sure that we're committing to do the work to pay thriving wages, for starters. Our tribute falls flat and rings hollow if it lives and dies only in this chamber and in a lovely tribute. So let us thank them, not just with our words and applause, but with our actions and our continued advocacy. Thank you.
Thank you, members. Seeing no further announcements, Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to lay over the balance of the calendar until tomorrow.
Seeing no objection, the balance of the calendar will be laid over until tomorrow. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that the House stand in recess until later today.
The House will stand in recess until later today.